My husband was drugging me. He called them vitamins. I swallowed them every night. The strange part isn't that I didn't notice right away. It's that when I finally did, I wasn't angry. I was tired. Not sleepy tired, something deeper. Like my body had already accepted what my mind was still catching up to. I didn't confront him. I didn't cry. I pretended to sleep. I want you to understand that choice before you judge it. Or maybe you won't judge it at all. I didn't know then what it would cost me to stay quiet for one more night. I just knew I needed to see the truth with my own eyes. This happened when I was 30. Married for 4 years. Living in a narrow 2-story house with a finished basement and walls that held sound too well. On paper, my life looked settled. Predictable. Safe. That's what makes this hard to tell. Betrayal doesn't always arrive with shouting or bruises. Sometimes it comes in a small white capsule and a glass of water. The night everything changed, I remember noticing how early the heaviness came. It was barely 9. I was still replying to an email when my eyelids started to sink, like someone had turned down a dimmer switch inside my head. My husband, Mark, was already watching me from the couch. Not smiling. Just waiting. I said I was tired. He said, "You've been pushing yourself." He always said that. I went upstairs and lay down fully clothed. The room tilted gently, the way it does when you're just on the edge of sleep. But something in me stayed alert. A thin wire of awareness. I let my breathing slow. I let my body go heavy. And I listened. At midnight, the bed shifted. Very carefully. Like he was afraid of waking a child. I kept my eyes closed. My heart was steady, almost calm. That surprised me later. In the moment, it felt like my body already knew the script. I heard the dresser drawer open. The soft scrape of metal. Keys. Then footsteps. Down the stairs. Not out the front door. Down. The basement steps creak on the 3rd stair. Always have. I heard it, even through the fog in my head. That was when I sat up. The room swayed, but I stood anyway. Barefoot. No phone. No light. I followed him. I'm telling you this now not because I want sympathy, and not because I want revenge to feel justified. I'm telling it because there was a moment, standing at the top of those stairs, when I understood that whatever I found would change me. And I went anyway. If you've ever felt that quiet pull toward an answer you weren't ready for, you might understand why I didn't turn back. I didn't feel brave. I felt precise. Like this was the last step of a long equation I hadn't realized I was solving. I didn't know what he was doing in the basement. I didn't know why he needed me asleep. But I knew one thing with absolute clarity. The life I thought I was living was already over. I just hadn't caught up to it yet. And if you stay with me, I'll tell you how I learned to see clearly again, not by breaking, but by paying attention. Before all of this, my life was quiet in a way I used to be proud of. Mark and I met in our mid-20s. We weren't dramatic people. No whirlwind romance. No dramatic breakups before each other. We were steady. That was the word friends used. Steady sounded like a compliment then. It sounded like longevity. Like something that wouldn't crack under pressure. Our days followed a rhythm that felt earned. He worked in logistics for a regional supplier. Numbers, schedules, routes. I worked in client relations for a mid-sized firm, mostly from home after the pandemic. We woke up early. Coffee at the kitchen island. He liked his black. I added too much oat milk and pretended it was healthier. He left first. I cleaned up. We texted around noon. Not long messages, just check-ins. Dinner at 6:30. A show we half-watched. Bed by 10. Nothing about our routine felt forced. That's important. I wasn't trapped. I wasn't lonely. I wasn't afraid of him. If anything, I trusted him in the small, ordinary ways that build a marriage brick by brick. He remembered to pay the electric bill. He folded towels the way I liked. He brought me cold medicine without being asked. The vitamins started because I'd been complaining about headaches. They came and went, nothing dramatic, but enough that I mentioned it over dinner one night. Mark listened. He always listened in that way that made you feel like the room had quieted just for you. The next day, he came home with a bottle. A clean label. Pale blue cap. Multivitamin, he said. My mom swears by these. I remember smiling. That sounds ridiculous now, but I did. It felt like care. Like evidence that someone was paying attention to my body when I wasn't. I started taking them at night because they made me a little drowsy. Or at least that's what I thought at first. Mark said some supplements did that. Magnesium. Melatonin-adjacent stuff. He spoke confidently, casually. He didn't push. He just placed the bottle on my nightstand and went back downstairs. That's how most things happened in our marriage. Quietly. No pressure. Over the next few weeks, my evenings shortened. 9 o'clock became a wall I couldn't push past. I stopped reading before bed. I stopped finishing shows. Sometimes I barely remembered brushing my teeth. I'd wake up groggy but functional. Heavy, but not alarmed. Mark, meanwhile, seemed energized. Productive. He started spending more time in the basement, saying he was reorganizing storage. We'd always talked about turning it into a workout space or a home office someday. This felt like progress. Domestic momentum. Still, there were moments, small, almost embarrassing ones, where I noticed a pause in myself. Like the way he watched me swallow the vitamins. Or how he'd ask, too casually, "You took them, right?" Or how he'd linger in the doorway after I'd gone to bed. None of it screamed danger. It whispered discomfort. And I learned long ago that whispers are easy to ignore when your life feels mostly good. I told myself I was being paranoid. That marriage meant letting go of suspicion. That trust wasn't something you audited every day. And maybe that's true, to a point. There was one night, about a week before everything unraveled, when I dropped the pill by accident. It rolled under the bed. I reached for it, and Mark moved faster than I did. Too fast. He laughed it off. Said he didn't want me eating dust. I laughed too, but something in me tightened. Just briefly. Like a muscle you don't realize you've been clenching until it aches. I didn't say anything. I took another pill from the bottle. I went to sleep. Looking back, that was the moment, the one I revisit when I wonder how much intuition we're allowed to ignore before it starts demanding louder answers. Maybe you've had moments like that too. Not enough to act on. Just enough to remember later and wish you had. At the time, though, I still believed my life was solid. That love, when it's quiet, is safe. I didn't know yet that quiet can also be a cover. The first real doubt didn't arrive as fear. It arrived as math. I noticed I was running out of vitamins too quickly. It sounds small, almost petty, but I'd always been good with details. I knew how long a bottle lasted because I liked systems. 1 pill a night. 30 pills. A month. This bottle was nearly empty in just over 2 weeks. I told myself I must have miscounted. Or that I'd skipped nights and doubled up without realizing. The explanations came easily, the way they do when you want them to. Still, the next morning, after Mark left for work, I picked up the bottle and turned it over in my hands. No brand name I recognized. No pharmacy label. Just a clean white sticker with nutritional buzzwords and a list of ingredients in tiny print. I didn't Google it. Not yet. I put the bottle back exactly where it had been, like it might notice if I didn't. That afternoon, I felt off in a way I couldn't quite place. Not sick. Not dizzy. Just delayed. Like my thoughts were arriving a few seconds late to their own sentences. I reread the same email 3 times and still typed the wrong response. When Mark came home, he kissed my forehead and asked how my head felt. That was new. Better, I said automatically. He nodded, satisfied, and went to wash his hands. I stood there longer than I needed to, holding a dish towel, replaying the way he'd asked. Too specific. Too timed. That night, I decided not to take the vitamin. Not as a test. I wasn't thinking that clearly yet. I just wanted to feel like myself again for a few hours. I set the pill on the nightstand and told Mark I'd take it in a minute. He didn't argue. He just said, "Okay," and turned off the light. I lay there, listening to my own heartbeat. Waiting for sleep that didn't come. By 10:30, I was still wide awake. No heaviness. No fog. No sinking sensation behind my eyes. Just normal tiredness, the kind you can push through with a chapter of a book or a late-night snack. That's when my stomach tightened. At 11, Mark checked on me. He stood in the doorway, his outline darker than the hall behind him. "You still up?" he asked. "Almost asleep," I said. He hesitated. 1 beat too long. Then he nodded and went back downstairs. I didn't move. I didn't take the pill. I stared at the ceiling and let my thoughts line up in ways I'd been too tired to allow before. At midnight, he came back. This time, he didn't speak. He stood by the bed, close enough that I could hear his breathing change when he leaned down. I felt the mattress dip slightly, like he was checking my weight, my presence. I kept my breathing slow and even, counting between inhales the way I used to during stressful meetings. He stayed there longer than necessary. Then he left. That was the moment suspicion stopped being theoretical. I sat up as soon as his footsteps faded. My body felt light, alert, angry, in a distant, intellectual way. I picked up the pill from the nightstand and held it between my fingers. It looked harmless, chalky, ordinary. I didn't swallow it. Instead, I put it in my pocket. I don't know what I thought I'd do with it. Keep it as proof? Test it someday? At that point, I wasn't planning. I was preserving options. The next morning, I pretended nothing was wrong. I took the vitamin in front of him, or at least I pretended to. I slipped it under my tongue, kissed him goodbye, and spat it out once he left. I hated myself a little for how easy lying had become. But I hated not knowing more. Over the next few days, I paid attention in a way I hadn't before. I tracked time. I noticed how Mark's energy spiked after dinner. How he stopped drinking alcohol entirely. How he started locking the basement door when he went down there, something he'd never done before. One afternoon, I tried the door myself. Locked. I stood there, my hand on the knob, listening to the hum of the house. It occurred to me then that whatever was happening didn't require me to be unconscious forever. Just long enough. That thought settled in my chest and stayed there. I didn't know what he was hiding yet. But I knew this, my sleep was part of it. And the man I trusted was willing to take that from me without asking. Maybe you've felt that shift before, the moment when a question becomes impossible to unask. I remember thinking that even if I was wrong, I couldn't go back to not noticing. Some lines, once crossed, don't let you return to the same side. That night, I decided to stay awake. Staying awake turned out to be easier than I expected. I didn't take the pill. I didn't even pretend this time. I told Mark I'd already taken it earlier, and he accepted that with a distracted nod that felt rehearsed. By 9, I was in bed, the light off, my body arranged carefully into the shape of sleep. I slowed my breathing. Counted. Waited. My mind, fully alert, began doing something strange, cataloging. The hum of the refrigerator downstairs. The click of the thermostat. The way the house settled in on itself at night. I'd lived here long enough to know its language. That night, every sound felt louder because it was finally reaching me without interference. At exactly midnight, the bed shifted. Same careful movement. Same pause. He leaned close again. I could smell his soap. I wondered if my face gave me away, if alertness had a temperature, a scent. His hand hovered near my shoulder but didn't touch me. After a moment, he straightened and stepped back. I waited until I heard the basement door open and close. Then I followed. The stairs were cold under my feet. I kept one hand on the wall, moving slowly, deliberately, like speed might betray me. The basement light was on. A thin line under the door. I hesitated there longer than I meant to. I wish I could tell you I felt brave. I didn't. I felt committed. Like turning back would cost more than going forward. I opened the door just enough to see. The basement didn't look like storage anymore. The shelves had been cleared. In their place were metal racks. Boxes labeled in black marker. Plastic bins stacked neatly, some with red tape, some with blue. A folding table stood in the center of the room, covered in paperwork and a laptop. A second table held pill bottles, dozens of them. Some identical to the one on my nightstand. Others not. Mark stood with his back to me, wearing latex gloves. He was counting pills. I didn't move. I don't know how long I stood there. Seconds, probably. My body felt hollow, like all the air had been replaced with something heavier. I watched him sort capsules into small plastic bags, seal them, and label them with dates. Dates I recognized. Nights I had slept. He opened a drawer and took out a notebook. Flipped through it. Made a check mark. Everything he did was efficient. Calm. Familiar. This wasn't new. I stepped back before the floor could betray me. Closed the door silently. My heart didn't race. That came later. In the moment, I felt eerily still, like my system had shut down anything unnecessary so I could survive the next few minutes. I made it back upstairs. Back into bed. I pulled the covers up and stared into the dark, my hands shaking now that I was no longer holding myself together. My husband wasn't just drugging me. He was documenting it. I thought about all the mornings I'd woken up groggy. The headaches. The gaps. The way time had felt slippery, like it didn't fully belong to me. I thought about how easy it had been for him to move through the house while I slept. How carefully he'd planned it. What hurt most wasn't fear. It was recognition. This was someone who knew me well enough to know I wouldn't wake up. Someone who knew exactly how much to give me. Someone who smiled at me over breakfast afterward. I didn't sleep at all that night. When morning came, I moved through the house like a guest. Mark kissed my cheek, asked if I wanted eggs, talked about traffic. I nodded where I was supposed to. I swallowed where I was supposed to. Inside, something fundamental had collapsed, but I kept it from showing. After he left, I went back to the basement. The door was locked again, but I knew now that the lock wasn't for security. It was for privacy. I didn't force it. I didn't need to. I already had the image burned into me. Instead, I went to the bathroom and vomited. Then I sat on the floor until the shaking stopped. There's a specific kind of grief that comes from realizing the person who shares your bed has been using your body without your consent. Even if you don't yet know how. Even if you don't yet know why. It's not loud grief. It's quiet, corrosive. It eats trust from the inside out. I remember thinking, briefly, selfishly, that maybe I was overreacting. That there had to be an explanation that didn't destroy everything. That thought lasted about 5 seconds. Because there was no explanation that included love. I didn't cry until later. What I felt first was small. Reduced. Like a variable in someone else's system. If you've ever had the ground shift under you without warning, you might recognize that numb clarity. The kind that tells you the truth before your heart is ready to hear it. By the end of that day, I knew 2 things with certainty. He didn't see me as a partner anymore. And whatever he was doing required me to stay asleep. That was the lowest point. The moment when trust didn't just crack, it vanished. And standing in that absence, I understood that nothing would be the same again. Shock doesn't last as long as people think. It burns hot, then it burns out, leaving behind something colder and more useful. By the second night after I saw the basement, I wasn't shaking anymore. I was thinking. Carefully. Methodically. I stopped taking the pills entirely. Not dramatically. No refusal, no confrontation. I pretended. I let Mark believe the system was still intact. That I was still predictable. Still manageable. I matched his routine with precision because I understood something important now. Routine was the only thing keeping me safe. While he thought I was asleep, I stayed awake. While he thought I was unaware, I watched. I started by reclaiming my body. That sounds abstract, but it wasn't. It meant eating regularly. Drinking water. Taking walks during the day so my muscles remembered what normal fatigue felt like. I needed to know myself again before I made any decisions. I needed my instincts sharp. Emotionally, I kept myself neutral. That was the hardest part. I didn't allow myself to spiral into what IFS. I didn't let myself imagine worst-case scenarios. Fear would rush in if I gave it room, so I didn't. I treated this like a problem to solve, not a betrayal to grieve. Grief could wait. Survival couldn't. I replayed the basement scene in my mind, looking for details I'd missed. The labels. The dates. The volume. This wasn't about one night or one mistake. This was a system. And systems exist for a reason. But here's the thing I didn't expect. I didn't want revenge. I wanted control. Control over my own narrative. Over what happened next. Over how this ended. That realization changed everything. Instead of panicking, I planned. I started sleeping with my phone under my pillow, brightness turned all the way down. I memorized the sound of the basement door opening. I learned how long Mark stayed down there, never more than 40 minutes. Always alone. One afternoon, while he was at work, I took the pill I'd hidden days earlier and drove to a private lab across town. I paid cash. I didn't give my real name. When the technician asked why I needed the analysis, I said I was checking for allergens. That was a lie. But it was a clean one. The results came back 2 days later. Prescription sedative. Moderate dose. Not enough to knock someone out completely. Enough to make them compliant. Unaware. Easy to move around without resistance. Easy to miss time. Seeing it in writing didn't break me. It focused me. That night, I stood in the bathroom, looking at my reflection, and made a decision that felt strangely calm. I wasn't going to confront him in the heat of anger. I wasn't going to flee in the middle of the night, leaving questions unanswered. I was going to finish the story. I began gathering my own documentation. Dates when I'd felt unusually groggy. Times he'd gone to the basement. Photos of the pill bottle labels. A short audio recording of the basement door opening at midnight. I didn't know yet who would need this. Law enforcement, a lawyer, maybe just me. But I knew one thing: truth only matters if you can prove it. And here's where things get complicated. Because in the quiet of that planning, I noticed something else rising in me. Not just fear. Not just anger. Clarity. I had been shrinking without realizing it. Not dramatically, not visibly. Just small concessions. Letting someone else manage my health. My sleep. My sense of time. I saw now how easily love can slide into permission if you don't keep checking where the lines are. There was a moment, late, sitting alone in the dark, when I wondered how many people would choose to confront immediately, and how many would do what I was doing instead. Waiting. Watching. Building a quiet exit or a quiet reckoning. I didn't know which choice was braver. I only knew which one I could live with. By the end of that week, my plan was simple. I would let him think he was in control for one more night. And then I would take it back. Not with shouting. Not with tears. With evidence, timing, and my eyes fully open. That was the night I stopped being his subject and became my own witness. The night I chose was a Thursday. Ordinary. Unremarkable. The kind of night that doesn't stand out in memory unless something goes wrong. Dinner at 6:30. Pasta. A glass of water for me. No wine. He'd stopped drinking entirely, and I'd followed suit without comment. We talked about work. About a neighbor's dog. About nothing that mattered. At 8:45, Mark slid the pill bottle across the counter. "Don't forget," he said. I smiled. Took one out. Swallowed. Or at least, that's what he thought. By 9, I was in bed. Lights off. Breathing slow. Body heavy. The performance was muscle memory by now. I could do it perfectly. At 11:58, the bed shifted. Pause. Check. He left the room. I waited 5 minutes. Long enough for him to settle. Long enough for him to believe the night was his. Then I stood up. Phone in hand. Camera already recording. I didn't rush. I didn't sneak. I moved with the quiet confidence of someone who knew exactly where the floor creaked and where it didn't. The basement light was on. The door wasn't locked. That was new. I opened it fully this time. Mark was at the table, back to me again. Gloves on. Pills laid out in rows. The laptop opened to a spreadsheet. My name was in the first column. I didn't announce myself. I turned on the light behind him. He froze. Just for a second. But it was enough. He turned slowly. His face didn't register fear at first. It registered calculation. Confusion. Then something sharper. "You're supposed to be asleep," he said. "I know," I replied. My voice didn't shake. That surprised both of us. He glanced at the stairs. At the door. At the phone in my hand. The camera light blinking red. "You didn't take it," he said. "No." He opened his mouth. Closed it. Tried again. "It's not what you think." I didn't respond. I stepped closer to the table and angled the camera down. The pills. The labels. The dates. The notebook. His handwriting. "You've been drugging me," I said. "For weeks." He laughed. A short, sharp sound. Defensive. "You were stressed. You weren't sleeping. I was helping. You documented it. That doesn't mean. You did it without telling me." He reached for the notebook. I moved the camera closer. "Don't." He stopped. For the first time since I'd known him, Mark looked small. Not weak. Cornered. "You don't understand," he said. "I needed time. Privacy." For what? He hesitated. That was the answer. I backed toward the stairs, never breaking eye contact, the camera still running. My heart was loud now, but my hands were steady. This conversation is over, I said. I've already sent copies. That was a lie. But he didn't know that. His face changed completely then. The mask dropped. Anger surfaced, not explosive, just cold. You think anyone's going to believe you? He asked. I don't need everyone, I said. Just one. I turned and walked up the stairs. He didn't follow. I heard the chair scrape back. Heard something slam. But he didn't come after me. He knew it was over. Whatever control he'd built depended on my silence and my sleep. Both were gone. I locked myself in the bedroom. Called the police. Spoke clearly. Gave details. Told them there were drugs in the basement and evidence on video. When they arrived, Mark didn't resist. He didn't look at me as they led him past the doorway. Not anger. Not apology. Recognition. Like he was finally seeing me awake for the first time. That was it. No shouting. No dramatic confession. Just the clean snap of truth breaking through a lie that had gone on too long. The adrenaline didn't hit until later. In the moment, all I felt was space. Room to breathe. The house felt different after they left. Not quieter, emptier. Like a stage after the lights go out, when the set is still standing but the story has ended. I sat on the edge of the bed for a long time, still holding my phone, even though the screen had gone dark. My hands were finally shaking. Not violently. Just enough to remind me that my body had been running on borrowed calm. The police took the pills. The notebook. The laptop. They asked careful questions and didn't rush me. That helped more than I expected. Being believed without having to fight for it felt unfamiliar, almost disorienting. I didn't sleep that night. Not because I was afraid he'd come back, he couldn't, but because sleep felt like surrender, and I wasn't ready to give anything up yet. I made tea. I sat on the living room floor with my back against the couch. I watched the first light of morning slide through the blinds and land on the wall where our wedding photo still hung. I didn't take it down right away. In the days that followed, I moved slowly. Intentionally. I stayed with a friend at first, then came back to the house during the day to gather things. Clothes. Documents. Small objects I'd forgotten mattered to me until I saw them again. A mug from a work trip. A scarf my sister gave me. Evidence of a self that existed outside that marriage. Mark didn't contact me. His lawyer did. I learned pieces of the truth in fragments, the way you learn a language you never wanted to speak. He'd been selling prescription sedatives illegally. Small quantities. Controlled distribution. He'd used our basement to store and package them. My sleep wasn't a side effect. It was a requirement. Knowing the reason didn't make it hurt less. But it did strip away the last illusion that any of this had been about care. Or stress. Or love. The hardest part wasn't the legal process. It wasn't the logistics of separating a life I'd built with someone else. It was the mornings. Waking up and realizing no one was watching me swallow anything. Realizing my thoughts arrived on time again. That my memories stayed put. That hours no longer disappeared without explanation. I grieved in small, practical ways. I cried once in the shower and once in my car and once unexpectedly in the cereal aisle at the grocery store. Each time passed. None of them broke me. There was loss, of course. The future I'd assumed. The version of myself who believed trust was something you earned once and then kept forever. But there was also something else, something steadier. I trusted myself again. Not because I'd been right from the beginning, but because when the truth finally demanded my attention, I didn't look away. I adjusted. I acted. I protected myself. The house sold faster than I expected. I moved into a smaller apartment with uneven floors and too much light in the mornings. I liked it immediately. It didn't feel temporary. It felt honest. Sometimes, late at night, I'd catch myself listening, waiting for footsteps, for a door, for something to intrude on my awareness. Each time, there was nothing. Just quiet. Real quiet. The kind that doesn't hide anything. I didn't come out of this louder. Or harder. I didn't become suspicious of everyone or cynical about love. What changed was subtler than that. I became attentive. To my body. To my instincts. To the moments when something doesn't feel right, even if it looks fine from the outside. Maybe you know what that's like, when recovery doesn't mean erasing the past, but integrating it. Letting it inform you without letting it define you. I didn't forget what happened. I just stopped carrying it everywhere I went. By the time the legal chapter closed, I had already started another one. And this time, I was awake for all of it. People sometimes ask me when I knew I was going to be okay. They expect a clean answer. A date. A moment. Something cinematic. But recovery didn't arrive like that for me. It crept in quietly, through ordinary decisions. Choosing what time to go to bed. Choosing what to eat. Choosing to trust my own discomfort instead of explaining it away. For a long time, I thought strength meant endurance. Staying. Being patient. Giving the benefit of the doubt until there was nothing left to give. I don't think that anymore. Now I think strength is attention. It's noticing when your body reacts before your mind does. It's respecting that reaction even when it's inconvenient. Even when it threatens a life you've already invested in. Especially then. What happened to me wasn't just about pills or deception or a locked basement door. It was about what can happen when someone decides they know what's best for you without your consent, and how easy it is to confuse that with care if you're not paying attention. I don't tell this story because I want people to be afraid of their partners. I tell it because I want people to be awake in their own lives. To remember that trust doesn't mean surrendering your awareness. It means sharing it, with someone who respects it. Sometimes I wonder how many nights I slept through before my instincts finally spoke loudly enough for me to listen. And I wonder, gently, without judgment, how many others are doing the same right now. Not because they are weak, but because they are human. If there's a question I leave you with, it's this. When something in your life feels slightly off, too small to explain, too quiet to defend, do you make space to listen to it, or do you rush to make it disappear? So that's my story, folks. If it resonated with you, go ahead and hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments where you're listening from. I want to know how far Emily Parker's voice travels. The moral is simple. Paying attention to yourself isn't selfish, it's how you survive with your integrity intact.